Mayor, I really have to put a lot of this, and I know that you've been saying, hey, it's not my budget, it's our budget, it's our budget, but I really have to put a lot of this at your feet as to where this is laid, because I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, this letter from the 6 councillors 6 weeks ago was as much about, my view, is as much about keeping their distance from a certain political alignment than it was about transport targeted rates. And I would like to have thought that great leadership, Mr. Mayor, great leadership would never have resulted in this, and good leadership would not have ensured that this sat on the table for 6 weeks, and the Auditor General got rang yesterday, 6 weeks after that was sent. So, Mr. Mayor, it didn't need to come to all this, and I really would like to say that I think, without being ruled out of order, Mr. Mayor, but I think it's time, and I'm confident that this will go through today, but I think it's time that you really gave the public some of your intentions as to the next election. And I think the sooner you did that, the better, because I think the transition of leadership needs to begin. And Mr. Mayor, I want to wind up by saying that I'm going to put up a second amendment to the one, because my one's going to get through easy, so that wasn't much of a challenge, but a second one. And I understand from meeting protocols and making good decisions and all that, that if this gets put up and has any support, then it's not for the chair to determine, but for your anointed deputy too. And that is, Mr. Mayor, that the governing body expresses no confidence in the Mayor of Auckland as chairman of the Budget Committee. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. An excellent contribution to the debate.
So, am I able to put that up, Mr. Mayor?
Well, look, Councillor, I'll give it some consideration. I mean, we already, I mean, if you want to actually have that type of debate, that's your choice. You could probably be here till about 10 o'clock tonight. Yeah. Right, the next person in the batting order is Councillor George.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I take the view that we've been sleepwalking in the way that we've handled this 10-year plan since the time that especially since the time it came back on the 5th of May, or the 7th of May, or the early date in May, because it's very apparent that when I hear what's happened to that letter that these 6 councillors sent to you, that very little has happened since that time. Look, I think that those councillors, I don't think, were taken seriously when that letter came in. It's just my understanding, because I would have thought that with a letter like that, knowing what the balance of the vote was 6, I think, voted against the long-term plan. Councillor Quacks wasn't there. You know what his political leanings are and what his thoughts on those matters were. Then you had these other people. So we're in this situation. It's made it really difficult for this council. But so that's one issue that I have real concerns about as far as the way the council has been operating and how it's handled that. But, and I've been going on about it today, I do have real concerns about that consultation, because I've read that brochure that went out to the public, and I've got it here. Maybe I've missed something, but it seems pretty hard to find where we're talking about a targeted rate that would be implemented in the brochure. I agree that at page 45 of the consultation document there is mention of those 2 options, but the 2 options, well, the fixed targeted rate doesn't anywhere amount to $99 for residential properties or $160 for businesses. It is $58.99, and then there is the other option of the revenue being gathered through a value-based targeted rate. So those two certainly didn't amount to this figure that you've got there, and I just cannot get my head around how you've come up with that figure of $99 for residential plus GST and $160 plus GST for business. That is kind of a very difficult one for me to get my head around. Now, Councillor Cashmore tells us that he's had some knowledge of that, but, you know, I think any decisions that we make arriving at a quantum, especially of a targeted rate, there needs to be some workings as to how the figure's been arrived at. And I just find it very difficult to ascertain as to how that's been determined. Now, you're saying in your amendment or your stem F to the document or to your motion that you're going to look at rail costs. Well, rail costs to me is one of the big issues that this city's facing, this council's facing, because if you just look at the rates revenue between 2015 and 2024-25, the 10 years of this plan, the ratepayers are putting in 83% more in rates to rail or to public transport travel demand. And that is a huge increase. Everywhere through this plan is increases, and we know that people told us pretty clear in that consultation that they weren't happy with a 3.5% year-on-year increase through this plan. Now, I believe that these 6 councillors who have written that letter did so pretty quickly after we had passed the motion, but passed the resolution to present this plan to the Auditor General. But, you know, they had misgivings even when we made the decision back in early May.
Councillor George, stop. Yeah. This is about the 5th time so far that you've gone on about this issue. You are not any of those councillors. If you've got any submission to make, you submit for yourself and don't surmise or try and imply what they thought or didn't thought or what happened. You are not a part of the discussion. So you just keep your focus on your submission.
Yeah, when Councillor Casey, I think, was it?
No, Councillor George, carry on, please, but actually get on and talk about what your thinking is on this issue.
Hearsay is not kind of barred, is it?
Not good evidence at all. Now, carry on.
I don't think it's barred in a debate, in a council debate.
It's not helpful.
Well, it's not, Councillor Filipina.
No.
So anyway, I think that there has been a distinct, it's a sleight of hand way that we've come up with this fixed targeted rate. It's not transparent how it's been derived, how the figures come up, how we've determined that figure, and that really leaves me with grave concern about how the whole thing's been put together. And I think that if we're going to go out and consult, we should listen to what people have actually said. And I was aware of the number of comments that were made in relation to the targeted rate. It's very limited. So overall, I find myself really finding this as a real difficulty, and I think that there's been a betrayal of our communities in the way that we've now come up with this far higher figure. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Chris.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Quite a day. I think it's 20-something months since I arrived here, and it's been a long process in those 20 months getting to this meeting here today. I think it's 20-something months almost exactly since we were elected. You talk about February being the formal commencement of the project, but for me personally, I take it from the day I got around this table. I was talking to you and my colleagues about some of the things that I wanted to get over the line, and gave my maiden speech along with other new councillors, and at that point that was our opportunity to highlight the things that I really wanted to get over the line. I talked about at that time, and I think I came to the election with a pretty clear platform, and at that first meeting I did speak about 3 big issues. I spoke in subsets of these, but I talked about the reliance on property rates as not befitting a 21st century international city, and the determination to do something about that. I talked about the provisioning of this city with a first world public transport system. And I also talked about the dire need to start reflecting back on the Royal Commission's lost work about public engagement, implementing meaningful public engagement with Aucklanders. They were the three key issues I talked about on that day, the day of maiden speeches. And the first and the second of those issues are absolutely intertwined. You can't treat with one without the other. The transport investment can't be sustained if we just rely on the property rate. We started embarking on that new pathway because we committed to the alternative funding transport work, and we appointed the IAG to look at various options, and they reported back. We did embark on extensive public engagement. The public engagement for this last round for the big budget was like nothing that's been experienced before. 27,000 responses is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that was the product of our new significance and engagement policy, a new unit set up, and that's something we all got around the table and said, yeah, we needed to up our game in that engagement space, and we got great feedback. And we took the public lead. We responded to the public lead, and they said that there was a huge public transport deficit. We know that. They reminded us again. They've been telling that to us for some years now, and we finally got it. They said also that we really needed to look at alternative funding streams to fund that public transport deficit. And we landed pretty firmly in the space that we're now hopefully ready to confirm. It's a little uncomfortable arriving in a space which is a challenge to many of us. It's a challenge to Aucklanders, but it's necessary. It's overdue, it's over time, and we must commit now. If we don't, we've got a very serious problem in Auckland. So we landed in this space after extensive public consultation. We were told that public transport capacity issue is enormous and it had to be faced up to. It really is absolutely throttling the ability of Aucklanders to move to their places of learning and earning every day. When I take the ferry in the morning, I can see numbers on my particular ferry at probably about 1,000% more than what they were 5 years ago. I'm not kidding you, folks. This is reality. When I walk by Britomart, occasionally I put my head down into the bowels of Britomart and I just see thousands of people moving up those escalators. They weren't doing that just 3 years ago. They're connecting with a CityLink bus right outside Britomart, and that just fills up one after the other. And there's a queue left on the platform outside Britomart waiting for the next CityLink. It's mirrored all over Auckland, on every rail platform, ferry station, ferry terminal, bus station, it's all over the place. And others have talked about the motorway congestion or the general road congestion. I'm focused on the PT, because that is where the backlog is. I just want to give you some numbers, and our population in the last year's grown, I think, 2.3%, and previous years it's been about 1.5%. So it's growing quite quickly at the moment. If you don't know, I'm sure you do know this number, but if you're in any doubt as to the dire need to invest in public transport, the most recent Auckland Transport Board report said that rail year-to-date numbers are up 21.8% to the end of May. 21.8%. Northern Express, standout infrastructure, 16.8%. Other bus, 6.8%. The ferries I'm familiar with, 7.1%. It's just phenomenal. It's all over the place. And people are thirsting for us to do more. Over the last 18 months, Mr. Mayor, we have had hundreds of hours of workshops thrashing this budget out. Didn't start a month ago, seems to for some, didn't start a month ago. I'm welcoming those coming up to pace, but it started a very long time ago. Now, the attendance of those budget workshops, Mr. Mayor, was irregular, if I can put it diplomatically. Some members weren't around those tables thrashing out ideas as they should have been. And maybe that's starting to show up now. There's been a high level of agreement, though, on the absolute need to commit to transport spend, without doubt. And you've just spoken to that, and others have. Councillor Cashmore's just confirmed that as well. Personally, I'm very delighted that we've finally committed to that public transport reweighting. There's a significant reweighting in there. It's a big time in this city's history because I don't think this city has seen an investment like this in public transport since probably when the tram network was put in a different century, different decade. So we've lifted the cycling budget also from 13.5 to 124, and for every 33 cents we put in, we get $1 of delivery. Good spend, no doubt. I'm delighted to see the restoration of the volcanic cones in this budget, long overdue, too long abandoned. I'm perturbed to see the environmental management budget be not addressed, and I've conveyed that to you and others, and I'll address that in the next budget and try and lift the attention that that deserves. I'm quite concerned that we haven't faced up to the issue of creating a climate resilience fund. And I'm sure Dunedin and Whanganui will be starting to discuss that, and if they're not already discussing that in their meetings this week. Other big international cities realise that you do need to have that sort of insurance policy in your back pocket. We don't have that. I'm concerned that we've signed off SHAs in the back blocks of beyond that we are now having to link up to Auckland, to places of work and education. And that is costing us now, and the very councillors who are opposed to this budget voted for those remote SHAs, but they're not prepared to vote to connect them. That's the truth of it.
Hear, hear.
That's the truth of it.